Pawn e2 to e4. Pawn e7 to e6. Pawn d2 to d4. Pawn d7 to d5. Knight b1 to c3. Knight g8 to f6. Bishop c1 to g5. Bishop f8 to b4. Pawn e4 to e5. Pawn h7 to h6. Bishop g5 to d2. Bishop b4 takes c3. Pawn b2 takes c3. Knight f6 to e4. Queen d1 to g4. Pawn g7 to g6. Bishop d2 to c1. Knight e4 takes c3. Queen g4 to h3. Knight c3 to e4. Bishop f1 to b5, check. Bishop c8 to d7. Bishop b5 takes d7, check. Knight b8 takes d7. Rook a1 to b1. Pawn c7 to c5. Pawn f2 to f3. Queen d8 to a5, check. King e1 to d1. Knight e4 to f2, check. King d1 to e2. Knight f2 takes h3. Knight g1 takes h3. Pawn c5 takes d4. Bishop c1 to d2. Queen a5 takes a2. Rook h1 to c1. Queen a2 to c4, check. King e2 to e1. Pawn d4 to d3. Rook b1 to b4. Queen c4 to a6. Pawn c2 takes d3. Knight d7 takes e5. Rook c1 to b1. Knight e5 takes d3, check. King e1 to f1. Knight d3 takes b4, check. King f1 to g1. Queen a6 to d3. Rook b1 to b2. Queen d3 to d4, check. Knight h3 to f2. Queen d4 takes b2. Bishop d2 to f4. Queen b2 to a1, check. Knight f2 to d1. Queen a1 takes d1, check. King g1 to f2. Knight b4 to d3, check. King f2 to e3. Pawn d5 to d4, check. King e3 to e4. Queen d1 to e2, check. King e4 takes d4. Knight d3 takes f4. Pawn g2 to g3. Pawn e6 to e5, check. King d4 to c5. Rook a8 to c8, check. King c5 to d6. Rook c8 to c6, checkmate.